Ask questions what you want. Again, my name is Eric Martineau. I'm going to get into this. Let's begin by just asking a couple questions that I think everybody has in the backs of their heads. Have you lost any money in the stock market, 401k, TSP, or an IRA? How much of your investment portfolio is quote unquote guaranteed? Are you afraid of running out of money in retirement? Do you wish you could pay less in taxes? And that's what we're going to do today. Look, here's the problem, folks. We live in a society where the average American spends 75% of their money on debt service and taxes. Here's how the average American family spends every $1,000 that they make. 40% or $400 goes to taxes. 23% or $230 goes to lifestyle. 34% goes to debt service or $340. And we only put about $30 of every 1,000 that we make into savings. And by the way, it doesn't matter whether you're a doctor making a ton of money or a school teacher. In fact, I was a coach at one point for Robert Kiyosaki, and I worked with a dentist. And in her practice, she actually made $75,000 a month. But believe it or not, she and her family were spending $100,000 a month. It's just the system we're part of. So the question that we're going to ask is, if there really was a system to eliminate all debts, mortgage, credit cards, etc., in 5 to 7 years, would you implement it? And I'm here to tell you there is a way to, one, eliminate all debt in 5 to 7 years, lower your taxes. We're going to talk about that today, and then build tax-free wealth. Again, my name is Eric Martineau. If you're anything like me and you can't keep a thought in your head for more than 37 seconds without blurting it out, please jump in, ask questions. I've got the PowerPoint presentation to kind of keep me on track. I got a couple degrees. And when I got out of the Marine Corps, I went to work with US West Quest, and I worked as a vice president of research and development at those companies. What does that mean? Nothing, except I know how to read a little bit. So why did I come to Nexa? Well, I had my day job. I would come home. My wife was a loan officer with another company, and she was complaining about the lack of support she was getting in her company. And instead of doing what a husband is supposed to do, I'm told, which is just listen and be supportive of her, I did what I'd been trained to do as a VP of R&D, which was to go find her a better mousetrap. So I went to a Why Nexa meeting. In that meeting, about half an hour into it, a gentleman interrupted Mike Cordes and said, "Mike, do you remember me?" Mike says, "Yeah, you were here 2 weeks ago. You're the one that suggested we do ABC." And the guy goes, "Yeah." And Mike says, "Well, I'm proud to tell you that I've already changed those things." And I thought, oh my gosh, here's a CEO who took advice from somebody that doesn't even work for his company. He's already changed something. And then the guy says, "Well, you didn't do it right. This is how I would have done it." And I thought, gosh, you're gutsy, right? And Mike inquisitively said, "Sure, how would you have done it?" And the guy told him. Mike paused, thought about it for a second, said, "Dan Fouts, as soon as this meeting's over with, jump back into my personal Zoom room and let's change things." Having been a professional guy at R&D, I said to myself, this is the kind of leader that I want to work for. I went out and got my license a week later. I took the classes with Dave Luna, passed the test, and I became a loan officer. I joined them, my wife did. About 2 months after that, we were in a town hall meeting like today's, and somebody said, or Mike said, "I don't like our 401k. If anybody's got a better idea, let me know." So I sent him a bunch of emails. We went back and forth. And I basically pointed out what private equity could do, private equity banking can do, and why it's better than a 401k. You can see that video out on my website. It's called How to 3X Your Returns in Real Estate Using Private Equity Banking. Mike watched that. Here's what Mike said after we got all that said and done. For spending some time with me today. You had asked last December if anybody had an idea that could improve on the 401k, that you and Matt were looking for an improvement on that. And so that weekend, I think it was Friday, I texted or emailed you and said, "Hey, I've got this idea." And I don't know how many emails we bantered back and forth with, probably, I don't know, 10, 11.
I have to appreciate your persistence, I tell you what.
Well, and I tried not to be rude. You're the CEO, right? But I just thought, if he can see it. So what was it about private equity banking that clicked, that went off, that
Well,
changed your
honestly,
mind?
at first, the term private equity banking didn't click to me at all. I get thrown a million different ideas.
Right.
Right. So at first, no disrespect, it was a loan officer throwing out this great idea, that I get thrown out at a million times. And we listen to them. I
Yeah.
don't always listen to them immediately, right? But you were pretty persistent about, Mike, you need to really check this out. So I remember, and you sent over the videos to show it. And
Right.
so once somebody really takes a minute though to go through it, and I go through all these ideas, and
Right.
my job is trying to poke holes in them and tell people, like, this is why this idea won't work, right? Or this is what you have to fix to make this idea work to itself. So once I finally went through it, and I remember I went through it when we were pretty much up in quarantine. Um,
Yeah.
but we were up in our second home, and I spent the week, and I went through it. In the first few minutes of it, I'm like, okay, I realized the power in this, and I'd never heard of it before, and I'm kind of disappointed that I didn't hear about it after the fact, because it makes so much sense.
Right.
And so I was just, after going through it about 20, 30 minutes into the video, I was kind of like, hurry up and get to the end, because because I'm ready, right? Although you gotta kind of get all the details and the minutia of how the program works. But once I realized it and I took the time, it was not one of those. I realized this is not one of those things that somebody's just throwing out this cool little marketing idea.
Right.
This is a legitimate financial plan that anybody could take advantage of.
And I watched your YouTube video, Eric, at the 21-minute mark, and I'm like, all right, you know what? I got to look at this again. So I've been told about I've hated whole life insurance my whole life, by the way. So,
Yeah.
right. I'm more interested in accessing it to build other business models. So we were going to loan that company a lot of cash, but then Eric introduced me to this, and I says, well, maybe hold up. Instead of issuing a loan, maybe we put it all into these policies and then pull out interest-free base, or not interest-free, but low obligation loans that using your money twice, right? You have the insurance policy and loan the money. So I'm like, hold on, let's back up a minute. My hope is that we can get this done inside of 2020, but I know that's with underwriting, that's probably a stretch. So
No, it makes sense. Honestly, every single loan officer or any moderate to high income person has got to look at this program. And then even moderate to lower income, it still has significant benefit. But it's an absolute no-brainer.
Oh, you cut out.
Just an absolute no-brainer. We need to do a demo with all the loan officers so they can see this private equity banking concept. We can announce it at town hall as well.
Got it.
And they're going to maybe do it a couple weeks out so they can lead up to it, have a presentation ready, and just show a loan officer first and foremost how private equity banking will help them and their business and their wealth management.
Right.
And of course, once the loan officer can see it, then they're really going to understand how their clients could see it help.
And I think that's where there's really so much power involved in this. Like, what's the normal human being going to do when they've paid off their mortgage and they've got $450,000 in a normal mortgage sitting there as a bank account that's theirs? They're going to either buy a bigger house or move someplace else. I mean, it's not like as if the game ends when people get out of debt. They use it to get out of debt, and then they use it to go and get back into debt with something bigger, better, and etc.
Well, I think using it for the fun stuff, right? Asset acquisition, even better than using it to get out of it. I mean, get out of debt with it, that's great. But then you start getting into wealth. Right?
True wealth.
Debt reduction is phenomenal. Get out of debt and then use it to build wealth. And what a great way to build wealth, though.
Yep. Well, I'm glad you were willing to put up with me bugging you with so many emails that Friday and Saturday.
Because you were with Next and you made me listen. So
Well, I appreciate it.
I'm grateful that you did. So.
Thank you so much again, Mike.
All right, Brian.
Have a great afternoon.
You too.
We'll see you.
We live in a society where our system teaches us to get in debt and pay as much taxes as we can. And, I think that's one of the things that we're going to teach people how to do differently here. This quote here by Tony Robbins. He says, contrary to popular wisdom, knowledge is not power, it's potential power. The execution of knowledge is where power lies. What we hope to do during this 4-part series, and it is a 4-part series now, is to give you the tools that you need to get out of debt, pay less in taxes, or pay less in taxes and pay less in interest. So in part one, I do talk about high cash value insurance, how it works. In part two, which was last week, Danya was here. She talked about the software that we can use to manage our debts. Today, I've got Marvin here, and he's going to talk about corporate structures and how we can use those structures to pay less taxes. And then in the fourth one, which will be next week, hopefully I can talk Marvin into coming back with me, and we'll talk a little bit about how the different buckets of money work, taxable buckets versus never taxed buckets. Another quote I like, Mark Twain says, "It ain't what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so." And so the idea here is to look at what we know for sure about banking and taxes that honestly just ain't so. And so we're going to show you how you can pay less in taxes legally. We're going to show you how to become your own bank. That sounds mind-blowing. We're going to show you how to save money first and then spend money. And we're going to also show you how you can use your money twice simultaneously. I know, all concepts that probably you've never heard of and are hard to believe even exist. In fact, I was talking to Sharon about it this morning, and she said, "Eric, when I first heard about this from you, I was just like, that's crazy." And she said she had to go and talk to another handful of people before she came back to me and said, "Okay, yeah, let's do this. There's other people doing this craziness, not just you." So again, back to what I was just saying. For every dollar we earn, currently the average American puts 75 cents into debts, usury, and taxes, and only 25 cents into their pocket. What we hope to do is give you the tools you need so that you could say, put 50 cents into your lifestyle and savings and only 50 cents into debt, usury, and taxes. What do you think, folks? Would that be good? Everybody's nodding their heads, but nobody's talking. Okay. And what if we could get you to the point where you had 75 cents of every dollar going toward lifestyle and savings and only 25 cents going toward debts, usury? John's already got his thumb up. Okay. So that would be better, John? Yeah. Okay. Well, again,
Yes.
okay, freedom from this is what we're trying to do. So let's just assume, for argument's sake, that we could reduce that tax load from 40% down to 20. Marvin, is that possible?
Yes.
Okay. So we can get taxes down to 20% and we've wiped out our debt. How are you going to use the rest? John, how would you use it? How would you split it? I put 40-40 here.
I like that.
Okay. How about you, Susan? How would you split it? Ken? Alex? Anybody?
I'd put more in saving and investing that'll create more for lifestyle.
There you go. How about you, Ken?
Investing.
Investing. All right. So what about in retirement? And I know, Alex, you look too young to worry about that right now, but some of us have gray hair. And I'm thinking the whole idea of this thing is to get to the point in your life where you have 100% of your income that you need to live on tax-free and interest-free. That doesn't mean you wouldn't have other investments that might be taxable investments, but you'd have enough so that all of your needs are taken care of in retirement. They call it getting to zero, where zero taxes and zero interest. Is that really possible? Yes, it is, and we're going to show you how. Now, it doesn't end there. Obviously, life ends when we pass away, but if we've done these things properly, we will leave behind to our posterity tax-free generational wealth and a family banking legacy free from usury and excess taxes. Okay, so I've put together a four-part series now. In the first part, as I said, which was 3 weeks ago, I talked about private equity banking, how it can be used to get out of debt, and how you get taxes. Here's a basic overview for those of you that weren't here 3 weeks ago. First, this is IRS sanctioned. The IRS calls this a cash accumulation account or a cash accumulation contract.
You said IRS sanctioned. You mean sanctioned as in approved, not as in a penalty, right?
Yes, IRS approved.
what
Is
he
that what that
means.
means?
IRS approved. What you're saying, it's IRS approved and not penalized by the IRS, right? Because sanctions can be both.
Oh, yes, it's approved. It means approved. In fact, it's written into their
Right.
code. Yes.
Yep, okay.
All right, I'll change that word. Thank you, Diane. Where you get your own bank, if you will, and that bank is tax-free. Your money is tax-free. Tax-free growth, should I say, and tax-free access. You also have liquid cash, so you have anytime access, unlike, say, a 401k. no age restrictions, no fees or closing costs like you would if you tried to get money from some other source like us as loan officers. You get protection from creditors and lawsuits and from bank failures. We saw a couple of those last year, in fact, 5 of them. Guaranteed returns, thus protecting us from an unpredictable economy. Won't go into that. Compound interest on all of our cash value and our dividends. And this is the concept that I think so many people have a hard time with. And if we have time today, I've thrown in a slide or two to kind of explain it, but it's the dual use of our money. We get a savings account and a loan account at the exact same time for the same amount. Both, one's earning and one's paying interest, but they balance each other out. And then we also get the ability to partner with some of the most stable companies out there in the nation, the insurance companies, not the banks. Okay, part 2, which was last week. So Danya was here last week, and she talked about how you can use some software that she's got to help you manage this path toward getting out of debt. Obviously, Americans are $17 trillion in debt. And as the question I already asked, I'll repeat, if I could show you how to eliminate all high interest payments and all your debts in 5 to 7 years without earning or spending any more, would you implement that system? And that's what Danya talked about, the concept that Warren Buffett says that we need to do not save what is left after spending, but instead spend what is left after saving. And she has the software, again, we talked about that last week, to manage that process. In part 3, which is today, Marvin is here, and he was an IRS agent, and now he helps people not pay taxes. Can I say that, Marvin?
Not exactly.
Okay, because I know you're restricted on what you can say.
The IRS has a mission statement, believe it or not.
Okay.
The mission statement is they want to help taxpayers pay the right amount of tax.
Okay.
But the difference is we have a little difference of opinion about what right amount means.
Okay. Well, so Marvin is here, and he's correcting me because I don't want to get anybody with a license in trouble. He's here to help us pay the right amount of tax. Is that fair? Okay.
That's fair.
Okay. So tax rates depend on 2 things in my mind. Again, you can correct me if I'm wrong. The type of money we're making and who gets that money. I think all of us have heard about Warren Buffett when he said that, he pays less money in less of a tax rate than his secretary. And then he goes on to explain what he was saying, that payroll tax takes 1/3 of our money, but he doesn't pay tax on capital gains or dividends. He doesn't have to pay those payroll taxes on that. Therefore, he pays a lower overall rate. We're going to talk about that today. So the types of money, Marvin's going to go over the different kinds of money that exist and who gets it, what kind of an organization. Is it a partnership, a C Corp, a trust, etc.? We'll go over that. Now, I add this in here so that you loan officers understand where I'm coming from. When I got here to Nexa, we had 2 forms of income. We had licensed activities as a LO, and we had our rev share, same things we have today. But back then, all of that money had to go into a personal checking account because our licensed activity had to go to the person that owns the license. We all know that. But I said to myself, wait a minute, rev share is not a licensed activity. That's a non-licensed activity. So why couldn't my rev share get paid to an LLC or a C Corp? So I asked Mike that question in town hall one day. He said, that's a great idea, Eric. Let me look into it. 2 days later, he sent out an email to all of us saying that we could do that. So Nexans, you're welcome. It was because I understood that different kinds of money can be taxed different that I asked Mike that question. And again, next week, what I hope to do is, again, talk Marvin into coming back, and we'll talk about how we can move monies from forever taxed buckets into never taxed buckets. So we have our taxable income, a taxable bucket. We have a tax deferred bucket, qualified plans, and then we have never taxed, which is death benefits, insurance, loans, and defined benefits. That's what we'll go over next week. And again, the idea is to get as much of our money from the taxed environment or tax deferred environment into the non-taxed environment. So, Marvin, you ready? I'm going to hand it off to you here in just a second. This is part 3. Marvin's going to be in here talking to us about that. Let me first state this, though. My father was an IRS agent all his life. And when he got out of the IRS, he went to H&R Block. So he did taxes all his life, has done my taxes all his life. And at one point, Diane and I had like 16 rental properties and I don't know how many LLCs. My dad used to say to me, Eric, the code has about 2,600 pages in it. The statutes have about 9,000. The regulations and case law are about 70,000 pages, but there's only about 30 to 40 pages that tell us how to pay our taxes. The rest tell us how not to pay our taxes. All that stuff up there. And so my question is, can your CPA find all the treasures in the tax code treasure map? Well, when my dad passed away, I needed a new CPA, and that's when we ran into Marvin. So Marvin has been, like my father, with the IRS. He went in as a GS2, left at age 55 as a GS12, and he's been doing taxes for 26 years. So with no more further ado, Marvin, it is yours. You tell me when to click these, and I'll click the slides.
Okay. You know, 1913, Americans kept all of their earnings, and they still had schools, roads, colleges, railroad systems. We were the most prosperous nation on earth without a tax system. So since we've had the tax system, we've had to come up with strategies to figure out how to keep some of our money. So I believe the IRS has one goal, that's get all of our money. And my goal is to keep as much as possible. So we're kind of at odds there. New slide. Taxes really do erode the wealth. You really want to teach your kids to be conservative. Take away 30% of their ice cream. I keep thinking half the ice cream.
I threw this one in on you. You didn't add this one, Marvin. I did. But yeah, during the presidential debates, Hillary Clinton, and this isn't a political thing between these two, but Hillary Clinton tried to make Trump look bad by saying, hey, you know, he doesn't pay federal taxes. And Trump said and interrupted her and said, in true Trump fashion, that makes me smart. Is that a true statement? That if billionaires can get away with not paying taxes, is that for reals, Marvin?
Well, I think that's why they're a billionaire.
Okay, I'll go with that.
Okay, the Supreme Court ruled that it's lawful to arrange our taxes so we pay as low a rate as possible. There is no patriotic duty to increase one's taxes. Over and over, the courts have said there's nothing sinister or in so arranging our affairs to keep as much of our own income as possible, which means keeping our taxes low.
There we go.
I like business structures because we can use them to determine how we are taxed. Each entity has a special tax advantage. None of them have every tax advantage. That's one reason I like to use lots of entities. Every entity has its own niche in saving money. Now, each type of income is taxed differently. Most people are aware of ordinary income, and they see attached to the ordinary income, one way or the other, a thing called payroll tax or self-employment tax. Rental income is the next, and interest is very similar to rental, and dividends, and short-term capital gains are the next best. What we want to achieve is the tax-exempt income, which there are many types. I was looking at another webinar saying there's 11 types of tax-exempt income. Wow. But I think he missed 2 or 3 of them. Next slide.
Okay.
Each entity is taxed differently. If you have a W-2, you're going to be paying the highest taxes. Sole proprietorship has expenses before they start seeing how much is taxed. General partnership, there are other advantages to that, which include higher depreciation rates. Limited partnerships, limited liability companies. I like limited liability companies, S corporations. I prefer to stay away from because the IRS wants to do a W-2. C corporations, I really like C corporations. because there's so much flexibility in a C corporation. I don't know, well, I'm afraid that accountants try to tell you it's double taxed on a C corp because they make more money, I think, on other kinds of organizations. And I really like trusts. Trusts are more flexible than any other type of entity out there. You just have to learn how to make them flexible. Sole proprietorship. You can pay your minor children up to $13,850 this year, tax-free. The self-employment tax helps you qualify for various credits. Work it right, you can get most of that self-employment tax back in the lower income levels.
Okay.
I love the LLCs. I have several of them. It creates pass-through income. It also gives you flexibility when it's used with other types of entities. It protects assets and gives you the ability to depreciate the asset. And once they're depreciated, you have other options with that. Rental income, royalty income. I don't think we have time to go into the benefits of rentals. Consultation income and expenses. We can leverage that in that type of income so many different ways.
So we become a consultant basically to ourselves or to one of our entities?
Yes, we become a consultant.
Okay.
We can pay ourselves for consulting with our companies.
So a consultant doesn't pay
There's
self-employment tax?
Self-employment or payroll tax.
Got it. That's the one, payroll tax. All right, thank you.
Yep. The only thing I don't like about S corporations is the IRS requires a W-2.
Okay. At least one employee.
Yeah. And as I mentioned before, the W-2 is the most expensive way to pay yourself. If you want to get a loan, you might want to do that, but we're trying to avoid that as well. C corporation is the public face of the company. As I tell my clients, this is where you want your liability. You want to lease assets in the C corporation, so the only thing you have there is liability. And if you're going to pay wages, pay it out of your C corporation. And you also provide insurance and other benefits through the C corporation. If something's going to come back and bite you, make sure it's in the C corporation.
Got it. So for
Because
liability.
there's flexibility.
Right, which
For
is why this is
liability.
controlling assets and lowering liability. So the C Corp gives the best, or one of the best, I don't know the proper term or how to say it, against liability? Okay.
Yeah. Because of the flexibility of your C corporation, that's where you want liability.
Okay.
The trust, there's so many different types of trust. They give you
Anonymity?
Make you anonymous.
I know. You were the one that told me the word, so that's why I threw it in there, my friend. Got it.
I just can't say it right now.
Yep.
But the trust, you can put your life insurance in, you put your automobiles in it, your real estate. You can have a trust for each type of asset you have. You have your family trust.
And I think one of the things you commented about that to me when we were talking a couple of weeks ago is that they're not visible to anybody because they don't have to be reported. Something like that. How did you word that?
That's the whole point. You don't have to tell the county you have one. You don't have to put it in the recorder's office.
Got it.
And that's how you keep your assets safe, is nobody knows really who you are or what you own, because it's put aside, it's locked up.
Right. So when you and by the way, he sent me his slides and I put them in here. He said hold corporate stock, and I was thinking like stock in the stock market, and he clarified that for me as no, it's your own personal stock in your C Corp, which is how Diane and I have it, by the way.
I looked at how to get the most benefit out of charitable contributions, and next to a 501c3, your trust is probably your best tax advantage for making charitable contributions. And it can also be a member of LLCs or other LLCs. And the trust can be designed to accomplish anything you desire. It's a contract.
Got it.
And you can form the contract to accomplish what your goals are, which is why there's so much flexibility in a trust. So if each one of these entities give you benefits, why not use several of these entities to create the greatest tax advantage for your business, for your family, for your lifestyle?
Right. And by the way, folks, I met Marvin, and he was working at another organization when I met him, and they would say this is the only way it can be done. And the thing that Marvin kept saying to Diane and I, because when Diane and I met Marvin, as I already alluded to earlier, my dad had done our taxes, and my dad used to say that my tax return, our tax return, Diane and I's tax return, was the most complicated return he would do all year. But we had like 16 rental properties, and we had tons of LLCs with all these different properties in them in different states. And I'm sure it was very confusing. Um, and so I was looking for somebody that could actually get through all this mess and make something of it. And that's one of the things I really liked about Marvin is that he said, "Hey, you." So we brought some of the mess to him, and then he's over the years. How would I word that, Diane? Unfixed it or fixed it? He's modified some of it,
Cleaned it up.
I'm good
cleaned
at
it up.
puzzles.
Yeah.
I
So
take these tax returns, they're all puzzles. I put the pieces together where they should go.
exactly. That's a good way of putting it. So we brought him a broken puzzle. And over the years, he has fixed that puzzle for us. And we're still working on that today to make that puzzle closer to what we need so that we pay the right amount of tax. I'll try to use your words there. But yes. So, anyhow, so sorry, back to you.
Let's look at net income after tax. A very simple diagram here. If you have $100,000 of W-2 income, you're lucky if you have $68,000 after you pay your payroll tax, or just the payroll tax. So nearly a third of it's already gone bye-bye for you. Other kinds of income, short-term capital gain, rent, interest, you generally keep about 81%. Let's go on to long-term capital gain. Now, long-term, you can keep about 88, 89%. Now, actually, for a married couple, I believe it's like 81,000 you can have tax-free, which is the next slide, which is my preference. Tax-exempt income, you get to keep all of it.
How many kinds of
And
tax
that's the
exempt
goal.
income are there, Marvin? You were saying that a minute ago?
Well, one fellow was pointing out 11, and I think there's several others that he missed.
Okay. Because most of it, at
You
least,
can have,
I don't know about others on the call, but I personally had never thought about transferring my income into a realm where I could call it tax exempt, except for my exemptions. But all the kidlets are gone out of my house now, so.
yeah. Unless you use the grandkids now.
You'll have to show
They
me how to
still
do
have
that.
that $13,850 exemption.
Alex, you got any kids I can rent from you? I'm just kidding. She's shaking her head, yes. But you want to use them yourself, I'm sure. All right.
See, everybody has $13,850, but you can't take it directly from your children on your tax return. You need to be able to pay them in order to use the exemption.
Are there
That's
child
one
labor
type of
laws that keep us
tax-exempt
from hiring
income.
our kids? Or what's that? How does that work?
You can hire your children.
Okay, just not somebody else's kids. Okay, Alex, you get your kids back. Okay,
You
so,
must make the exemption available through a business
so what does that mean in English?
for your children, your grandchildren.
So you actually have to hire him into a family business, an LLC or something like that?
You can do it through your sole prop,
Okay.
but if they're your grandchildren, it needs to be your children's sole proprietorship. The rule is they need to be working for one or both of their parents. They have to be the sole owners of the company they work for.
Okay.
Sorry.
It can be a partnership if the only partners are mom and dad.
But okay, so it can't be like mom partnership with somebody else.
Correct.
Unrelated. Okay.
And
But
minor
moms
children
do
only, right?
What's that?
Minor children only, or it competes with their
Yes, once
adult
they
income,
turn
right?
18, they're subject to self-employment or payroll tax.
Okay. So same thing with 200,000.
I used to
Shows you
pay my
still-
kids to shred documents for me. They loved doing it and I loved having them doing it. It was, easy. So
Yeah, make work
I paid
fun if
them
they like
well for
doing it.
shredding.
I was gonna say I didn't think it was worth $600 an hour, but yeah, okay.
Well,
I don't know what she paid him.
you pay them about 15 to 25 an hour.
Okay, there we go. You only get tax advantages that you or your CPA know how to find. Most CPAs that I've talked to want you to get an S corp and just an LLC.
I have every one of these, so I won't. I'll get on my software and just figure out what if strategies with different entities.
Oh, you've actually got software that allows you to put in the kind of entity and then what happens to taxes when they do that?
Mhm.
Oh, that's cool.
If people give me a phone call, they'll call me and say, "What happens if I do this?" I go, "Well, here's your choices. You can do it this. It'll be taxed this way if you do it this way. Be taxed another way if you do it a different way."
So people
So I
have the
just plug in
ability
the
when they start
numbers and say,
doing this to
"Okay."
go out and build the organizations that they need, even in the same year that you're filing taxes, or is that usually for the next year?
I try to make it as when I'm doing the what if strategies, it's for the current year.
Wow.
So people will call me about 24 and say, "What happens if I do this?" And I'll do the best I can to say, "Okay."
Oh, so they'll show you
This will
23's
be
taxes or tax return, and you'll say, okay, so if you did this for 2024, this is what it would end up looking like if your
right.
income was similar.
Right.
Okay. And by the way, folks, these are genuine questions because Diane and Marvin are the two that have really worked together for the last 5 years. So Diane does it, and I don't question it because they're both very smart, much more than I am. So I just trust what they do. So yeah, those are genuine questions that I'm asking. In fact, this is kind of what we look like, Diane and I, and I wanted to kind of talk about this part too. In ours, Diane and I have had to do two things. We've had to move from as individuals, we've had to move a lot of our assets to the LLC and other assets over to our living trust. Can you talk to that, Marvin?
You may have lost me, but
Well, who owns our
your
assets? We
business
don't have the
assets,
title to our home in our name anymore, correct?
correct. I would put the title to my home in my trust.
Okay.
And then if you're going to use the home in an LLC, you'd want to use a land contract
And what about
and
rental
transfer it
property?
through a land on.
Would you
So
put that in an
a
LLC
land
or a trust?
contract,
Sorry.
you want your deed in the trust. If
Okay.
you're going to use it in the LLC, you want to either sell on a temporary contract, which is a land contract that can be terminated without foreclosure. And then the LLC can either rent it from you personally or they can rent it to a corporation. And the corporation can pay the rent on it. So you can rent out office space, you can rent out storage space, you can rent out whatever you could use in your business on your home.
Which is what I have on the next slide. So the way that Diane and I lower the amount of tax we take in W-2 or 1099 income is that we rent assets from the LLC, and our C Corp also rents assets, and it also has consultant fees that are being paid. Is that correct, Diane, Marvin? Did I depict that right for
Yeah.
us?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I want to talk a little bit about how the insurance plays into this. There are three parts to the insurance. There's the body that's insured. Then you've got the policy owner. They can be the same person, or the owner of your policy can also be the LLC. And then I think in most cases, people would put the beneficiary inside of the trust. Is that what you usually see, Marvin? What I just depicted there?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I'm going to just suggest that for now, the owner of the policy happens to be in one of the LLCs, and I'll show you why. Again, back to what this whole thing is called, private equity banking. We're trying to teach you how to become your own bank. And so if your cash value is in that LLC can now has access to loans that are going to be less than 1%. And so that LLC can now make loans to individuals, whether it's back to yourself or family members. My wife and I just made a loan to our children for a bridge loan. It can loan money up to the C Corp to expand the business, or it can come back here and acquire more assets.
When you said less than 1%, Eric, did you mean less than 1% interest rate on that loan or less than 1% of the value? Or what was that 1%?
1% in the net
Interest.
cost of interest. So the cost of capital is less than 1% total, is what I meant by
Okay,
that.
got it. So, okay, so
And
Okay.
I got an example to show on that, so I'll explain that. But again, the concept here is that we learn how to be our own banks. And I give a presentation, it's out on my website, called Where Do Banks Put Their Money? I'm not going to go into that here. Just suffice it to say that if you go to the FDIC's website, where Bank of America has to put their profit and loss statements, under their asset columns, they have $9.3 billion in fixed assets, property, but they have $22 billion in life insurance assets. And if you go to Wells Fargo, it's the same, about 8.5 billion in fixed assets or property and 18.5 billion in insurance. So what they've done is they've used that money. Now, I'm going to argue something that probably doesn't make sense for a guy that sells insurance for a living, but this is the point that I think a lot of people don't understand about this. Being able to have access to money that's costing you less than 1%, we all need affordable money more than we need death benefits. And I know it sounds crazy coming from a guy that quote unquote sells insurance. But the thing is that the reason that it comes with a death benefit is because this is how the tax code has been written. If we want this money that is tax free, grows tax free, we have access to it tax free, this is the only place I know of where we can get at it. And so if you want to call it that, you could say that paying the insurance company is kind of acting as the tax. So let me explain what I mean by that. And I had somebody that's been with me now for 2 years get a hold of me yesterday. And he said, he's been, like I said, been with me 2 years. He has cash value. He said, Eric, I just am not understanding this thing. So we went online and we looked at his back office. And he has $74,000 right now in his cash value. That money is earning 4.76%. So his money this year in his cash value is going to earn $3,522. Anybody on this call that doesn't understand that as a loan officer? I didn't think so. Everybody's got it. Okay. Now, at the exact same time, without diminishing one penny of that 74,000, he has already borrowed about $69,500. And he's paying 5.66 to the insurance company to get that. So he's going to pay the insurance company this year $3,934. So if we look at the net effect there, he's borrowing money at 0.9, 90 basis points. Let me pause there for a second. All of you are loan officers. Nexa has 230 some odd banks available to us last time I looked. Anybody know of a bank that will loan a signature loan to any of you for less than 1%? Diane, that's what I meant by less than 1%. Does that make sense, Diane?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. And so if we look at the cost of his money of getting that $69,500, this year it's going to be a negative $411. Now, I asked this man,
I said, so what did you use that 69,500? You took out a loan for that much. What did you do? And he said, well, I paid off my Visa card. Well, cards. It was more than one card. And I said, what are you paying on those? And he said they were all in the 29% range. So I said, did you have 69,500 that you could have just paid in cash to wipe out those credit cards? He said, no. And I said, so this year you were going to pay $20,000 in interest to the Visa cards. He said, yes. And I said, but instead you paid the Visa company that 69. He goes, yeah, but this is my problem, Eric. Now I feel like I'm paying off this loan twice. I want to ask you guys a question that are watching this. Did he really pay off that loan? Alex, you're shaking your head in the right direction. So tell me what you were saying with your head nod.
I was thinking not twice. I mean, he's still paying it off when he pays off the insurance loan, but he didn't pay it off twice. He just moved the debt. He didn't pay it.
Exactly. And so he moved it and thank you, because he wasn't getting that, believe it or not. And so all he really did is move his money from a place where he's paying 29% to a place where he's paying a net interest rate of 0.9, give or take a fraction of whatever. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and it's a no-brainer.
Okay,
It's
and that
like,
was my
duh.
next question. Is that a no-brainer? Yeah, how many of you would do that, right? But then he said to me, and this is where I said this is kind of like the insurance tax. He goes, yeah, Eric, but I have to pay for the insurance this year. And I said to him, yes, you do. So the cost of his insurance, and this is in year 2, was $8,842. And I know there's probably some of you on this call that are going, how on God's green earth did you ever convince somebody, Eric, to spend $8,842 in interest or on insurance in 1 year? But he is, and this is his second year. But let's add those two numbers together. Negative 411, negative 8,800, we get a negative 9,253. So if you want to call the cost of insurance his insurance tax, by all means, go ahead and call it that. So now we have 9,253. And so I said to him, you were going to pay Chase or whoever giving you that Visa $20,000 this year. Is that correct? He said, yes. And I said, but you were able to pay that off. And now it's costing you, instead of $20,000, it's costing you 9,253. I said to this gentleman, if you give me, are you willing to give me $9,253 if I turn around and give you back $20,000? Anybody on this call that's not willing to do that? Because that's what this is about. That's how this works. You pay the insurance company $9,253, they give you back the ability to go out and do this, and in this case, he's saving $20,000. Now, that's the difference. 10,902. Alex, since you are already involved in this, do you mind if I continue to ask you a question?
Sure.
What should he do with that 10,900 this year?
Invest it.
And where's the best place to invest it right now?
Back into the insurance.
To do what?
Accumulate and pay more of that loan down.
Yes.
And help the
exactly.
death benefit. And I don't know.
Yeah, because if he pays, the idea is to get himself out of debt. If he takes that 10,000 and moves it over there, right? Here's what the numbers would look like in year 3. Now, his insurance loan is down to 59,000, paying 5.66. He's only going to pay 3,339 in interest. Now he's in the black, a whopping $182. But his cost of insurance, folks, because he's growing. Notice again, his cash value didn't go down, and I didn't put the new number in there. It would be a bigger number. But because that number's bigger now, his cost of insurance is $1,183. So we got a negative and a positive. We end up with a negative $1,000. If he was still paying on his Visa, trying to compare apples to apples, that would have dropped from 69.5 down to 68,000. Is everybody with me on that? That's about what he would have paid, paying normal interest rates
on that card. And so he'd still be out this second year, 19,720 in interest to Chase or whoever he had his card with. I don't know who he had his card with. If we subtract out now the new cost of insurance at 1,100, he's now got a positive number of 18,719. And if once again his goal is to get out of debt and he put it there against the 59,000, he's now wiped out nearly $30,000 worth of debt in 2 years, still making the same payments that he would have been making before.
Quick question. Remind me, when can he retake out like the difference between the 40 and the 74? Like, can he go all the way back up to 74?
Yes.
And let's say hypothetically, so he has a car for 20 grand. He puts that in there and gets that paid off too,
Yeah.
even quicker.
In fact, this
Yeah.
gentleman has about the same amount of money out on other cards right now, and that's what he should be doing with it. And yes, but it is fixed every year, Alex, and thank you for that question. Every year it is fixed, and he can only get so much money into this policy each year. He can put in, I think, about 36,000 each year total. So, good question. But yes, as soon as you pay it down, you can then borrow it back to do that again with, Alex. Okay, so I know some of you are looking at all this craziness that we just talked about, all these corporations, the trusts, LLCs, private equity banking, and you're thinking to yourself, this is just too stinking complex, right? I mean, how am I going to go and do this? I would suggest go back to this. And if you fall into that category, if you're the average American, and you might not be the average American, but I guarantee you, as loan officers, you have clients that are. And if you can learn how to do this for them, as Mike said, it's going to help them. But if you're the average American and you're making the average American salary household, that's $87,000. 75% of that is what you could get back by implementing all of this. If you're making 100,000, that's 75,000. If you're making 200,000, that's 150,000. You get the idea. So again, if what's overwhelming is how do I move from this debt to all these organizations, I would like to say to you, how is the wrong question. The right question is who. I would suggest reading these two books, Who, Not How, and 10X is Easier Than 2X. The authors, and they're the same authors in these two books, basically argue that you don't have to figure out how to do stuff if you can figure out who can help you do it. And so that's why I've built this 4-part series to bring the who's around you. Marvin can help with the building of he can do that scenario shifting that he just talked about and say, okay, with you and your spouse's income, this is how I would craft this thing to get you the least amount of paying tax. Is that accurate, what I just said, without putting you in trouble, Marvin?
Yes.
Okay. So you go in and you scenario brainstorm with Marvin, and he'll tell you what the structures should be. His attorney will then build those structures for you, and he'll do the math. And then he'll get back with me, believe it or not, and he'll say, hey, Eric, this is where their insurance policy should now go so that they can best utilize the insurance policy. And by the way, folks, this is why I haven't talked about this stuff all the time, because as you and I all know, as loan officers, I'm not allowed to tell my clients what they should be doing from a real estate standpoint because that's their realtor's job, right? I don't have that license. And the same thing holds true here. So I can't really talk to what Marvin does or what the attorneys that Marvin works with do, but they'll tell me where to put your insurance policy so now you have that banking set up. So I want to end with this and then open it just for questions. Reducing taxes and eliminating debt is just the tip of the iceberg, folks. What we really want to do is get to the part where we're building tax-free wealth. And I think that's where it's a game changer. So let me once again open it up for questions. Marvin, I'll give you back the floor if there's something you'd like to comment on.
Just going to mention, I think there's method in your madness of bringing me in here because I'm giving people money all the time. I'm saving them taxes all the time, giving them refunds.
Right.
Where they thought they're going to have to pay. Now they have money to pay for their life insurance.
Well, that's probably why I asked that question. Now that you say it, I hadn't thought about it until then. But, what would you do with that extra money? And what was Alex's answer? I'd invest it.
The average American only puts 3% into savings. If we can wipe out 20% of what you're currently wasting on taxes, that's 20% that you can put into savings, Alex. Susan, I've
remind
never
my
seen you
clients
sit
should
quiet
have,
for this long in my life. What's up, young lady?
Well, all the tax part is new to me,
Okay.
so very interesting. Yeah. So I was taking notes and
Oh,
trying to
and
figure
Marvin,
it.
we didn't put a slide in there that shows how people can get a hold of you. Do you want to put that in the chat room?
I have a question,
Yes.
Eric.
Sure.
So on these policies, which obviously I have one with you, and I'll talk about that in a minute. You talked about putting it into the LLC. Do I need to do that? I thought I was safe with the policy as it is because it's going to my, I'm triple dipping. I got my kids, I bought my house, I have my loan, I'm filtering money in and out.
You're asking the wrong hombre. You need to ask Marvin. That's why he's on this call.
Marvin. Well, let me comment a little more and then I want to ask Marvin that because if I don't have it, I know I need to do a lot of things. I've got the first two parts, which you talked about. I have the Money Max, which I love, and I have the policy. Do not have my taxes set up correctly. But what I would say to people is like Eric said, this took me years I mean, there's a lot of numbers. It's a lot of numbers thrown at you and your mind just goes, bleh. It's kind of like when we first learned loans. You're just like, what the heck? It's too much. And so I didn't act on it. I didn't do anything about it. I was like, what? Who's on first and what goes where? So I would ignore it, which we all do until I finally had asked enough people. One of them being my niece, like, hey, you heard of this? She's like, oh my God, that's how we paid off like $500,000 in debt in 5 years. I'm like, what? And they're very smart. I mean, you just start to talk to people and this really smart money people understand this already. And I thought, you know what, that's good enough for me. And this was right around COVID where I am losing on every other week, like $1,000 on my money. And I was like, that's it. And so we structured a
Where
policy.
was your money? In the market?
Yep. I could not stomach it. I just couldn't do it. And so there's a way to do it. Like Eric mentioned, where it's a tax shelter. You have to make, well, I won't get into that, but you have to make payments to it. So we did the payment thing. We're all set up. I pay $100 a year now. It's nothing. And I was able to buy my home with that money, pull it back out. So I've double, triple dip on this. My kids have it. I have the loan. I have my house. And then the second part you talked about last week, the Money Max, that was a complete no-brainer to me. And that helps me to filter all this. So I just wanted to mention that. But Marvin, obviously, I don't have a trust set up yet. I need to do that. I do have some of my money in the bank just for a little bit of safety. I have a payable upon death because I haven't bothered to do anything else, but do not have everything in a trust. And what about that life insurance policy I do have? Does that need to go in one?
It doesn't hurt.
Okay.
One thing you do with the trust is you spell out exactly what you want done with the assets that are in that trust. If you have minor children, you want to spell out as part of that trust what to do with the minor children and how they're going to be taken care of if something happens to you. So you just make sure that that the trustee knows exactly what your wishes are. That's the purpose of the trust.
Yeah. Do you do trusts or do you just do taxes?
I specialize in taxes, but I have a team that does the trust.
Okay.
Yeah. He's got an attorney and folks behind him that do that part, Sharon. I didn't try to get the attorney in here too, but yes, if you can get a hold of Marvin, he'll do the what if scenarios on what kind of organizations you need, and then he'll send you over to his attorney. Am I speaking out of turn there, Marvin, to get those answers or get those entities created?
I've trained a young lady that I'm training her in taxes. I've trained her in how to set up the entities. And she's been really good. She knows more about the setup of entities than I know. She's gone beyond what I've taught her. I'm kind of
Go ahead, John.
What does a typical living trust run? I'm talking to my financial planner now, and as Sharon had mentioned, I had talked to Eric last year about this, and there was a lot to basically digest, and so I'm just trying to kind of put things together now. Again, I have an LLC. I've had properties before. I sold them, and I probably didn't. I should have kept them. I'm just trying to sort of hit the reset button and think about, and I think Martin or Eric and I had talked last year about qualifying for an insurance policy was because I'm 65. I probably didn't have the health requirements to be able to qualify, blood pressure, cholesterol, etc., and was finding someone in my family to still be able to set this up. So Eric, we'll probably have to reconvene, and I need to get back on your training schedule because I think last time I jumped in on, I don't think you had 4 modules. I think you had 2.
Yeah, you know, and John, the real reason why I didn't do that is because legally, as we all understand, being licensed loan officers, we understand we're not allowed to talk about what the real estate agent does unless you're like Susan and actually have a license as a realtor. And so I couldn't talk about those things. And and another thing that keeps me hamstrung, again, all of us as loan originators understand this, that information I get is private, right? And so I can't tell you what I'm doing with Alex or Sharon or Susan or anybody else because that's their private business. Um, and but having said that, I was at Marvin's the other day. Although we've worked together for 5 years, I stopped by his house. He lives in a different state, and I was driving through that state, so Diane and I meandered our way through. And I asked him, I said, "Hey, are you still working with so and so?" One of the guys that's here at Nexa that I'd sent his way a couple years back. He goes, "Oh yeah, I just saved him a ton of money." And so he didn't tell me how much. The next day, just out of by chance, that gentleman called me from Nexa, and we were chatting. And I said, "Oh, by the way, last night I was at Marvin's house." I said, "You still working with him?" And I think, as I already mentioned earlier in this, he and I had both met Marvin when Marvin was at a different organization. And no, I didn't like that organization. And I said, that wasn't my question. Are you still working with Marvin? Oh yeah, I'm still working with Marvin. He's wonderful. He just saved me a ton of money. In fact, I'm going to have to shove money back in to my tax return and pay taxes on it so I can qualify for a house.
Well, like I said,
That's
I've
the
got
bright
to,
side.
well, and I've got to circle back to you, Eric, and get sort of the fundamentals of everything that's the benefit of the program or programs. And then, and Marvin, did you I'm sorry, and I scattershot that. Did you have a typical cost on the living trust?
I believe the starting point's about $1,200.
Okay. Well, that's good. All right. Well, listen, guys, I've got to run. Eric, this was a hand turner again, and as Sharon said, I really need to focus in on maybe 3 or 4 slides at a time. So, and you know, I'm also a jarhead, so I'm going to use that as my excuse. Thank you so much for today.
I'll send you the box of crayons with the Eagle Globe and Anchor on it, John. I've got a bunch of them in the back room.
Okay. All right. Well, again, thank you so much.
Okay. Any other questions for Marvin?
I just wanted to say how much Marvin, how important it is to find somebody who's educated about this. I'm so sorry my camera isn't working. I've got something going on in the background. But it's so important to work with people who are educated about this. This is the 3rd organization that we've worked with. And I'll tell you that the middle one, I think, screwed us up pretty badly. So I'm really excited about working with someone who's as knowledgeable as Marvin is. And on the insurance side, the same thing. There are a lot of people out there who will tell you they understand this stuff, but they don't. And we've seen it happen over and over again. So be sure you understand that this knowledge is has been gained over years of refining and honing this to make it the absolute best possible for people. So it's pretty exciting to be able to save people this much money and see it change their lives.
And I still go to people. I still have 2 or 3 mentors that I go to help me when I get into a pickle with some of this stuff. So it's a really, I take it seriously. So any other questions for Marvin? You guys can bug me anytime you want, but
It's been a joy for me to see people get into homes because of being able to help them with their taxes.
Yeah. And again, that's back to what Mike Cordes said, you know, do this for yourself, but then turn around and learn how to do this for others as a loan officer and spread this knowledge. And then you can help them get out of debt, help them get better properties, more properties, or whatever they need, or just pay off their properties, depending on where they're at in their life. And I think we've all helped a whole lot of people if we can do that. So, well, thank you, folks. I don't have any other questions.
I was gonna say the whole thing with get uncomfortable. Like I think like again, back to our world of loans. When I first started, I tried to learn every loan that there was. That's impossible. And now I do not try to learn a different type of loan until I have one, because every scenario is like a fingerprint. We're all different, but we have to jump in. You have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I finally just jumped into this somewhat blindly, kind of understanding, but all that math and everything would just there's too much stuff. And so I finally just did it, and super thankful for it. So appreciate it. It's life-changing for sure.
All right, Susan, thanks for waving. Thanks, folks. Have a great next day.
Good meeting y'all. Bye.
Thank you, Marvin. Really appreciate you.
Thank you, Eric.
Mm-hmm.